Run, river, run, run through the hills. Run, river, run to the sea. Run, river, run to your place beneath the sun. Run, river, run over me.
Hi, this is Jan Lewis. Welcome to be my guest. Today we have, from Barrington, Rhode Island, we have Elizabeth B. Splaine, we call her Beth, and she has written 4 books so far, and she's also a voice teacher, audiobook narrator, and obviously she's an author. Welcome, Beth.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
I haven't read them, okay, but we're going to have a fun time talking about them, that's for sure. Did you do the covers?
No. The last 2 covers, Swan Song and Devil's Grace, were done by a woman named Asha Hussein. She was out of Seattle at the time. I think she's moved, but she's an incredible graphic artist. Asha Hussein.
Oh,
yes.
yeah, I love the colors.
Yeah.
They really stand right out. Now, Swan Song is the latest one, or is that the first one?
That's the latest
The
one.
latest one.
Yeah.
Give us an idea. Beautiful picture of you in the back. Oh, my gosh.
Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of authors don't look so hot, but you look great. Give us kind of an overview of this one.
So, Ursula Becker her star is rising, her operatic star is rising in Berlin, and she rises to fame very quickly, only to find out that she's a quarter Jewish. She falls in love with Hitler's real-life nephew,
Oh.
whose children still live on Long Island, actually. She falls in love with Hitler's real-life nephew and becomes the obsession of Adolf Hitler because he was a huge opera fan.
Is this based on truth?
There's a lot of truth in it.
Yeah.
When I wrote it, I thought it was about 30% true, but when I was done and I did my resources list,
Yeah.
I realized how much truth there was in it.
Yeah.
So a lot of the people, a lot of the places, down to a restaurant in Berlin where Willie and Ursula go to eat, and exactly what they ate, all that research is true.
Went
It's
into
all
this.
in there. And at the end of the book, there's a letter to the reader that describes what's real and what's not.
That's
because
good.
when I read historical fiction, it drives me crazy if I have to stop in the middle of something to go look something up, and that's literally what I would do. So,
Yeah.
People may still want to do that, but at least at the end they know what's real and what's not.
I like what she says on the back. Swan Song, this was by Addie Applebaum reviewing it.
Yes.
Swan Song is a fascinating look into the world of German opera in the 1930s. Through the lens of a Mischling, half-Jewish opera singer, Swan Song should interest both music lovers and lovers of a fast-paced historical novel. How long did it take you to write this?
It took about 8 months.
That's a good time.
Yeah, and I started it when I actually started it in 2019. And then I took time off in the summer with the kids and the whole thing. And so, but all in all, it was about 8 months. So Ursula, I didn't finish, that was my fault, but Ursula and Willie become engaged, and that angers Adolf, and they realize that they need to get out of Germany. And so they're going to go back to his native England, and Ursula disappears. So the second half of the book is Willie literally traveling the world to find her. So.
Question is she alive?
Exactly.
Because Hitler wasn't too good at that.
Oh, and yeah, the ending is very direct and very brutal in a way.
That's a lot to take on.
Yeah, and I wasn't sure exactly what I was taking on when I started it, because the original intent was to just write about Ursula. This connection for me is personal because this goes back years when we lived in Hershey, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
I ended up singing with the Central Pennsylvania, as an opera singer, I ended up singing with the Central Pennsylvania Youth Opera.
Yeah.
And their very first show that I happened to see was called Brundabar. One of my voice students was in that show, and she took it upon herself to contact a woman in New York City who had been in Terezin, the camp, that was the country club of concentration camps, not my words. And this woman came and spoke to the cast and to the audience before the first show ran. And I became fascinated with this concentration camp that housed World War I Jewish heroes and artistic types, painters, poets, musicians. It's unbelievable when you see the list of who's who that was in this terrible place. It was originally meant to house 5,000 to 7,000 people, and it swelled to 70,000 at one point. So that's how I got interested in that. And the story was going to be about Ursula, who is very loosely based on a singer who fled to France. But then my husband and I were watching a World War II documentary, and they said something about Willie Hitler. And I said, who's Willie Hitler? And my husband said, so the next morning I Googled him, and he had the same real-life birthday that I had given my main character, her fictional birthday.
Oh, my God.
And I kind of smiled, and I thought, okay. And so that's when I knew that he was going to fall in love with her.
Oh, my God. Talk about coincidence.
Yeah, I know, right? There's a lot of that.
We're talking with Elizabeth Beth Splaine, and she is an author. She is a narrator for the audiobooks, voice teacher. You went to, let me see, you have an AB in psychology from Duke University and an MHA from University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. You've also worked in healthcare. Tell us about that.
Yeah.
How'd you get these different things?
I know. So my undergrad was in psych, and my intent was to become a child psychologist, which is the first book, and I know we'll get to that. But I ended up working in healthcare for 11 years until I realized that I needed something a little more creative. We had our third son, and I decided that I would start singing again, so I started studying voice again. I had studied classical voice when I was 12 for a couple of years, and I studied all through college, but then I took 10 years off and I didn't sing a note. So I started auditioning and getting parts in regional productions around in Pennsylvania and Philly. And then we moved to Michigan, and I ended up singing with Grand Rapids Opera, and then we moved again, and I continued to sing. But during that time, I started teaching. It kind of fell in my lap, and I really didn't know what I was doing, but people kept coming. And in the beginning, I wouldn't even let them pay me, because I said, no, I'm not a real teacher. You don't want to. But they kept coming, and what I used to see, because I didn't have a degree in music and I didn't have a degree in teaching, and so I thought, oh, this is a disadvantage. But I now realize, and my husband knew all along, that it was an advantage, because I approach things from around the sides as opposed to directly, and I can get to the heart of the matter versus being stuck in one particular way of doing something. So I did work in healthcare for 11 years, and I worked in Lynn, Massachusetts, and I worked in Boston at Beth Israel. And then I kind of made a switch into the business side of healthcare and became a consultant, healthcare consultant.
Did you work in psychology when you were in healthcare?
No, it was always in administration. So when I did a year and a half at Vassar College, and then I transferred to Duke halfway through sophomore year. And the experience at Vassar for psychology was fantastic. The experience at Duke was good, but it wasn't the same. I kind of lost my passion for that field. But I've expressed it differently in working with children. Obviously, when I'm teaching, it comes in mighty handy, and it comes out of my books, for sure.
Okay, Beth, now let's start with the first one.
Okay.
The very first. Now, this was when you were working with children, right?
This is, Blind Order, how this book
Blind Order
came to be. My first two books were self-published. I really didn't know what I was doing. We had just moved to Grand Rapids, Michigan, and our three boys, got everybody off to school, and I went upstairs and I brushed my teeth. And as I was brushing my teeth, I closed my eyes, and the toothpaste cap fell to the floor. And without opening my eyes, I knelt down to find the toothpaste cap, and I couldn't find it. And I really was feeling around for it. And I got really annoyed. And I thought, God, wouldn't it be so frustrating to be blind? Something as small as dropping the toothpaste cap. How infuriating. And when I stood up and I opened my eyes, the name Julian Stryker came into my head. And I was staring at myself in the mirror, brushing my teeth, and I thought, he's a blind child psychologist, and he lives in Boston. And I went downstairs and I started writing. I literally went downstairs and I started...
On the computer and just went for it.
Yes. He was having a dream, and I wrote the scene. However many hours later, my husband came home from work. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm writing a book." And I didn't have a clue clue what I was doing. So I wrote the whole thing.
It's a mystery, right?
Yes.
I love mystery.
Yeah, it's actually, I love this book so much because he goes up against a pediatric cancer physician who cures children by day, but she's so broken that she's a serial killer by night.
Oh, great.
And it's almost my favorite because these characters are she is so broken, and one minute you despise her, and the other minute you just think, God, this poor woman. So that was the first book.
This was the first one.
Yeah.
Blind Order. Now, we'll get to the other ones too, but tell the audience how they can pick up your books.
So everything is available on Amazon, or you can go to my website at elizabethsplaineauthor.com, and there you can find out all about me and my books and my process of writing and where I'm going to be next, etc., etc. elizabethsplaineauthor.com.
I love did you do the cover back then?
I did.
You know, this is the broken glasses and the blood. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
That's a drawer-inner.
Thank you.
Have you been in many book fairs? There's one in Rhode Island, every year.
I did the Rhode Island Author Expo,
Yeah.
and I've done the Barrington Arts Festival last year, and I'll be there this year on June 12th as well. And I plan on going this year as well.
You know Steve Porter?
I do, yeah.
Oh, he's been on many times.
Yeah.
He's a big guy. His wife's Dawn.
Yeah.
But I know
Wonderful.
the first time I went to that big one there used to be something on the Patuxent.
Oh, yes.
That's the one. It was like wall-to-wall authors.
Well, that was the road, but they had to move it
Yeah.
because of the building. And
Yeah.
this year it was, I'm told, it was my first one,
Yeah.
but I was told it was kind of a bust, I guess, because of COVID.
Yeah, there weren't as many people there.
That's
but
what-
when I went, my husband and I went, we went to the Roads on the Patuxent.
Yes.
In Cranston.
Yes.
I had no idea. When I walked in, it was like, you couldn't possibly meet every author.
There were just so many
Oh,
people.
no, and you walk down the aisles like, God,
That's
I
what
wonder that
everybody-
one's feelings because I'm going to this
I
one.
know.
I know. As soon as they found out I was around, a couple of them were coming up to me like, "Oh, here's my card. You
Yeah,
could be on the show."
Yeah.
So those are two of her books. Now we're going to get the next one after that was
Blind Knowledge.
Blind. No, was this the same character?
Yes, so it's the same Julian Stryker, and he ends up being paired up with a homicide detective named Alex Hayes, and they end up becoming a couple. The first book that I wrote was never published. It was called Blind Leading the Blind.
Okay.
So it was never published because it wasn't ready to be published, and I kind of put it to the side, took a couple months off, and then this awful female antagonist came to me when I was driving my son to New Year's Eve sleepaway camp, and I said to him, we need to think of a great name for her, and we ended up coming up with the very ironic name Linda Sterling, Linda meaning beautiful in Spanish, and
Right,
Sterling.
right.
So anyway, that was Blind Order. So Blind Knowledge is the follow-up to that. It picks it up several months later, and
It's a follow-up to Blind, right? Here, the
Blind,
first one.
yes.
Right, okay.
Yeah. And so Blind Knowledge, Julian and Alex are taking a very well-needed vacation, and as they're driving, as Alex is driving, because Julian's blind,
Yeah.
there's a little girl standing in the middle of the road on Route 2 in Concord, Massachusetts, holding a jar of buttons,
Yeah.
and she doesn't move as the car is approaching. And they end up finding this little girl, and she's mute, she doesn't speak.
Yeah.
So they need to figure out through child psychology, through drawing and things like that, who she is, where
Right.
she's come from. About 2 miles away is another car accident that it turns out is her mother and brother, but they're both deceased.
A tapestry of murder, blackmail, and resilience of the human spirit. These are intricate. These are great. You think very deeply into what's going on, and that I think draws your reader in.
I hope so.
Oh, I hope so too, because you know what? That's what I love. You keeping the main character, Dr. Julian Stryker. That's a really good thing too, because people, let's see, I read her book with that. I think I'm going to read the follow-up. See, you get them.
So what's your feeling about going back and publishing the prequel, Blind Leading the Blind? How do you feel about that?
A prequel to this one or to the first one?
To the first one. So it would be a trilogy then?
Well, I'm not in favor of publishers, okay? I think that they have a tendency to, you wait a year or so to even hear from them, and then maybe you're turned down, which is not you, it's them. I always say, do it yourself. Get it out there. We have a gentleman in Hopedale, he's the late 80s, God bless him. He He has one out every year.
Is that Julian?
He has mysteries,
Yeah.
and it's like every single year the man has, and he does it. I believe he does it himself.
That's
he
my
still does it
understanding.
himself, and he's well known.
I sat next to him at the
Oh,
expo.
Glenn Ickler?
Oh, no, I thought you were talking about Julian Ayat.
Oh no, I know Julian. He's
Okay,
been on the
that's-
show many
okay.
times. He's very cool. No, he's
Yeah, he seems
nowhere near
wonderful.
as elderly as our friend does, Glenn Ickler, but he's
Oh,
amazing.
I don't know him.
Oh, he's terrific.
Okay.
He has been on the show since this one started in 2012, and he sits at a fair and he's got like stacks of the ones he has,
Oh, that's so
and he does. I think he does all of his covers too. I think
Wow.
you've done a wonderful job. I especially love Blind Order. That
Thank you.
wow, that's good. Now,
you.
the next one up was Devil's Grace.
Yes.
What's this one?
So, Devil's Grace is a story. It's two true stories that I wove together. My
Yeah.
husband, who also works in healthcare, kept telling me these two stories and saying, you should write about them. And I said that there's not enough there by itself.
Yeah.
But I was finishing Blind Knowledge when a friend of mine who regularly communicates with people who have passed texted me out of the blue, and she said, how's your writing going? And I thought, that's not normal. So I picked up the phone and I said, what's going on? And she said, you're supposed to be writing about the light.
The light.
The light. And I said, okay. What does that mean? She said, I don't know. I'm just telling you what I'm hearing. You're supposed to be writing. So then I told her about these two stories.
Yeah.
And while I was on the phone, I said, I could join those two stories and create
Definitely.
something. So I was still writing that, but I wrote 10,000 words or something of that,
Yeah.
of Devil's Grace. So then I'm on the phone with another author who says, you know what, you should enter this competition. It's based in Vermont. It's called When Words Count. And I said, I wouldn't know what to. He's like, just call. So I called.
Yeah.
And I'm on the phone with Steve Eisner from When Words Count, and I'm telling him about this book. And he said, well, what's it called? I didn't have a title.
Yeah.
I just didn't. And I said, what? And he said, what's the title? I said, Devil's Grace. And he goes, wow, that's a very powerful.
And you just all of
Yeah. And I was like, that is really good.
Oh, that's
So I get off the phone, enter the contest.
Yeah.
It's not a normal contest.
Yeah.
It's separated by several months. You go and you meet the judges
Yeah.
who are a publicist, publisher, and publicist, and agent. And you do a marketing plan, you do your cover, you do your cover copy, you have to do a public reading, etc. And then they read your manuscript, and then you come back and you do your full presentation. So I ended up winning that contest. And the prize was the publishing package with
Yeah.
Green Writers Press based in
Sure.
Vermont.
Were you
And-
surprised?
Yeah.
Yeah. your very first book. Was this the first one or the next one up?
This was the first one published
Yeah,
by a
the first
publisher.
publisher,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I won this contest, and the prize was to be published, and
Yeah.
so that came out, and it's done really well.
Yeah.
And it's a story about a female physician who loses her whole family within 24 hours through two separate incidents. She starts asking questions about why her daughter died in the hospital where she works and was
Yeah.
supposed to be
Yeah.
in line to become CEO,
Right.
and she gets these walls put up. She starts to hear voices. She thinks she's going insane, and when in reality she's actually getting some help and she starts to kind of accept that, and she ends up finding out why her daughter died. And so it's a mystery, it's a medical mystery. It really, unfortunately, outlines a lot of what's wrong with the healthcare system. So in this one, pulled together
Yeah.
woo-woo, psychology, healthcare. Anyone who knows healthcare, when they read that, say, oh yeah,
Yeah.
this is really that many, yeah. But people who don't, I had one reviewer that said, I find it hard to believe that a CEO could be that malevolent. And
Oh, yeah.
I just had to smile
They
and
can.
keep my mouth shut. But, mistakes are made every day, and hospitals and health systems do an amazing job, and there are great
They do.
safety systems put in place now, much better than they were when I first started in healthcare.
It's on the back of this. It's just great. This is the way I like it. Starts right off, 0.63 seconds. That's the amount of time Angela Brennan has to process the oncoming truck that destroys half of her family and it irrevocably alters her life. That is a great beginning. You've got the person right there, right there. So I would say keep that up for sure. I don't like when there are too many characters in a book where I've got to keep going back and find, or if the start is slow.
Yeah.
And I got to work up 3 or 4 chapters to get I'm not going to even finish it.
Yep.
I haven't got time. I love it when it starts off like this. You know it. This is fantastic.
Well, thank you. And I had a great editor. Chapter 1 became Chapter 4. And so and the other thing that happened is that I wrote the prologue.
Yeah.
And the prologue is in August of 2018, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then after the prologue, we go back to May of the same year.
Yeah.
So in the prologue, you learn everything you really need to know about Angela Brennan post-accident. So
We have been talking with Elizabeth Beth Splaine, and she is, let's see, she narrates the audiobooks. She's obviously an author, and she's a voice teacher. Now, where does all this fit in, the voice teaching? What do you do with that? Teaching singing?
yeah,
Oh,
so
okay.
when I retired from the stage, I started focusing obviously a lot more on teaching.
Yeah.
And now I'm at the Rhode Island Philharmonic. I teach through them.
Mhm.
And with the pandemic, it's been interesting, but we're pushing forward, and I do some in person now and some at home. So I tend to get up, get everything going in the morning and exercise, and then I write, and then I start teaching between 2 and 3 and teach till 7 or 8.
So you
So-
tend to write in the morning?
Yes,
You're not a
absolutely.
night owl doing all night? No. She goes, no. We have kids about the same age,
Yeah.
the millennial group.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's interesting.
Yeah.
A different world.
It is the different
Their
world.
music is so different. It's not romantic at all. It's just like da-da-da-da, rap and hit you and all this and violence. I'm like, what are you listening to?
Well, my 18-year-old made an interesting comment. He said, when he listens to 80s music, he said, every single song has a drum in it.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I started listening differently. But because of what I do,
Yep.
The other interesting thing, I could talk all day about this, but the other interesting thing is that Broadway is always shifting, right? It used to be the kind of operetta-like sound that was
Yeah.
a more full sound, very romantic.
Mm.
Then we went into the 80s and 90s where it became more kind of vocal acrobatics,
Yeah.
Idina Menzel, that's more recent. And now it's shifting into hip-hop.
Mm.
And so when students are coming to me and they want to sing something from Six, the
Yeah.
musical Six, and Hamilton, love them.
Oh, yeah,
Fabulous
Hamilton.
music.
Oh,
But how do you teach that?
yeah.
And so it's something, I find it a challenge because it forces me to grow as a teacher because I have to keep them engaged. If it's not fun, don't do it, is what I
Yeah.
say about music.
Exactly.
And music should be fun.
Oh, yeah.
We work hard, but we have fun. But it's, it's a challenge. I could talk about that all day.
How can they get a hold of your books and you?
Yeah. So, ElizabethSplaineAuthor.com is the best way to get in touch with me. You can, there's a link on my website to email me directly. I love to chat with people, and I hope you reach out because I really, truly would love to talk with you. So that's the best way to get in touch
And
with
you would travel how far to give a presentation?
I will travel 2 hours to give a
Oh,
presentation.
good.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
A lot of my authors, I ask them up front, some that are beginning now, I'm not that crazy about going too far. I said, fine, we'll start with that. But there are so many places. A lot of them were opening up in 2021 again after COVID.
Yes.
But all over New England.
Yes.
And it's pretty amazing what's out there. I've mentioned it before, but an author will say, why are you sending me to the senior center? I said, because they read, but they also have grandchildren. And if you have, some even children's books, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I've told it many times. I had a guest on here. It was her first book. It was about her growing up. She went to a senior center, and within an hour, she sold 10.
Interesting.
10.
There was someone from Nichols Village in Groveland, Mass.
Mhm.
Tom Feeney is redoing the library there, and I was on the phone with him yesterday. And it's a retirement community.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to go up there. And what I've been doing for Swan Song is I've been singing.
Oh.
So I will sing an aria or 4.
During the presentation?
Yeah,
Oh.
because there's a lot of all the music in that book. I listened to
Yeah.
while I was writing,
Yeah.
and it just brings you to tears in many cases. But people like to have that connection,
Yeah.
and music connects people. Writing connects people too.
Yeah.
Anything artistic, I think, connects people. So if I can connect someone with song and performance,
Great thing to do.
yeah. Oh, and it's so fun.
Yeah.
I hadn't sung the Segue Dia from Carmen in like 14 years, and I thought, oh, let me just run this and see how it goes.
Right.
It's so much better now because I'm older. I understand myself better. I understand the process of singing better, having taught for 19 years. It's just so much better. So now I'm having so much fun doing the singing stuff in addition
yeah.
to the writing.
Yeah, you can tell that Beth really loves what she's doing.
I
I
do.
mean, it just radiates from you. Before we, hang on. I got choked up.
That's what the tissues are for.
Oh my goodness. Where are you going to be appearing?
Well, I'm going to be eventually at Nichols Village, but I don't know that they'll invite people to that. I'm going to be doing some presentations at the Rochambeau Library this summer, and all of this will be on my website. I'm doing a Magnolia Book Club next week, and June 12th I'll be at the Barrington Arts Festival. And I think that's it for now because we have 2 graduations and we're moving, so I'm trying to keep it not so crazy.
Oh my, that's a lot on your plate.
But I always can make room for more. There's always room for chocolate, puppies,
Oh, yes.
and more presentations.
Chocolate. Oh
Yes,
my gosh.
chocolate and puppies.
Do you ever find, though, that if you eat it, it doesn't always agree with you?
That is so true.
Same with coffee. Same with coffee.
Yeah,
I can end up. I
it's so
love that.
sad.
What's that cold bottle stuff you buy in the store?
Oh, the Frappuccino or whatever.
Yeah, the cold,
Yeah.
the Starbucks and
Yeah,
the Dunkin'
I know.
in the glass. Unfortunately, I don't always get away with that. I can end
know.
up sick.
Oh, well, that's really bad.
Yeah, I
but
love
yes,
it.
I
I
agree
love
with you.
it.
Age is a thing.
Chocolate. I could take a bath in a chocolate. I absolutely love it. Thank you, Beth, for being with us.
Oh, it was my pleasure.
and you've got
Jan.
another
Thank
book
you.
on the horizon.
I do. It's called Butterfly Reflections.
Okay.
It's about a 97-year-old former OSS operative who befriends a biracial 15-year-old girl, and it's based in Rhode Island, as is Devil's Grace. So that'll be out hopefully next year.
Next year. Let me know.
I will.
We'll have her back on the show again.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time and be my guest.
Thanks so much.
Riding on a shooting star, heading out toward a dream. Tomorrow's even closer than it seems.